Welcome to the Saint Lucian Analyzer, your choice for the critical, data-driven research analysis of the challenges facing Saint Lucia. Go ahead and give us a like and follow on Facebook, Medium, or Twitter. If you're interested in contributing to the Saint Lucian Analyzer, email us, stlucia.analyzer with an S, not a Z, at gmail.com. Celebrating Derek Walcott and his views on tourism. Saint Lucia holds the title #1 country for the highest Nobel laureates per capita in the world. It is a remarkable achievement for a tiny, quote, developing nation, end quote, with limited resources and a population of only 1,800,000 people. Complementary to Sir Arthur Lewis's economic work, let us explore 1992's Nobel Prize laureate Derek Walcott's famous contribution to literature and explore his views on the tourism sector. Derek Walcott's prophetic warnings regarding the overdependence of tourism seems to align with Saint Lucia's current economic woes. The travel hampering effect of the COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in a dramatic reshaping of the tourism industry over the past 12 months. Economic analysts have predicted that tourism figures are not expected to return to pre-COVID 2019 figures until 2024. The Book of Omeros. One of Derek Walcott's most famous collection of poems is his groundbreaking work in Omeros. Omeros can be described as the following, quote, a poem in 5 books of circular narrative design, titled with the Greek name for Homer, which simultaneously charts 2 currents of history, the visible history charted in events, the tribal losses of the indigenous peoples of the Americas, the tragedy of African enslavement, and the interior, unwritten epic, fashioned from the suffering of the individual in exile. End quote. Some of the poems from Omeros can be read here. In addition, the following paper titled What is Myth and History in Derek Walcott's Omeros is an informative read. Here is a powerful excerpt from Omeros. Quote, modernity has destroyed native values, and people are doing anything and everything for money. Walcott worries that one day the mafia will spin these islands around like roulette. Everyone is being corrupted. The island and its people are under the rule of Western modernity. If this continues, Achille worries that the future of Saint Lucia is going to be terrible because the young took no interest in canoes. That was long time shit. Once it came from Africa, and the sea would soon get accustomed to the noise. End quote. Achilles sees his culture and history being crushed, and he fears that it will continue till it is totally devoured by Western modernity. In this regard, Simon Gacandi states, quote, the implication of European modernity for the natives of the islands and African slaves was nothing less than the loss of cultures, physical annihilation, and historical displacement. End quote. Western modernity made St. Lucians culturally and historically displaced. Lots of changes have taken place in St. Lucia. The island and its people are becoming modern, but, quote, the step from tradition to modernity did not parallel the distinction between primitive and civilized, or even the opposition between black and white. End quote. Tourists still see the natives as primitive and sometimes another form of being, quote, as if they were horses, muscles made beautiful by the working sea, end quote. This prejudice enrages Achilles because, quote, the tourists came flying to them to capture the scene like gulls fighting over a catch, end quote. He is frustrated that their camera cannot capture the true virtues, simplicity, and essence of Saint Lucia. She was selling herself like the island without any pain, and the village did not seem to care that it was dying in its change, the way it hoarded away a simple life that would soon disappear. Walcott's complex literary work and its prediction regarding the impact of the Caribbean's over-reliance on tourism were ahead of its time. Despite his utterances, previous administrations in the region have failed to invest in other industries. Even Sir Arthur Lewis, in his prior work, 1954, on economic development with unlimited supplies of labor, advocated for economic diversification. Walcott's Carifesta X 2008 speech. Derek Walcott's opening speech at Carifesta X in 2008 also focused on the challenges of overdependence on tourism. Quote, Saint Lucian-born Nobel Laureate Derek Walcott has accused Caribbean governments of selling our land like whores to foreign investors. Walcott took advantage of the opening literary session at Carifesta X in Guyana to slam into many targets, including the regional governments. He said many are selling off the region without demanding much in return. As he put it, prostitution is a thing called development. End quote. His warning about Caribbean land acquisition issues is particularly relevant, given the apparent standstill with the Pearl of the Caribbean, DSH. Essentially, foreign investors were given prime St. Lucian land at extremely cheap value, with St. Lucians having little to gain in return. Quote, he called the land situation in his homeland of St. Lucia an obscenity of greed. It is about bribery, it is about corruption, he said, adding that huge hotels are being built by foreigners with no cultural or other gain being offered to local communities. End quote. He recommended that we invested in the arts as an alternative instead. And Walcott urged governments to tell these investors we need a theater, we need a museum. Right now we ain't got nothing. The theater in St. Lucia is an abomination, he said. As a sideswipe, Walcott related modern hotels to slavery, saying, at least the slaves didn't have to smile. Litany to the St. Lucian Pitons. Another, even more glaring example of Walcott's land acquisition prophecy is the ongoing development at the foot of the famous twin pitons. The powers that be would rather risk St. Lucia losing its World Heritage status by accommodating such an unnatural development on our sacred mountains. Authorization for the Pitons Villa construction was granted to Canadian billionaire Geoffrey Robiliard, with the green light officially given by the current administration. Walcott also highlighted the sacred value of the St. Lucian Pitons and warned all of us, quote, I am ashamed of my country, he sighed, because that's whoring, and you can quote me on that. If you are telling me, right, that there is going to be a hotel built at the base of Petit Piton, visible as a hotel, then that is whoring. And I am ashamed of my country. There can still be time for protest, but what can you say when a country approves of its own disfigurement? End quote. Walcott's litany to the Pitons from 1992 remains as relevant as it did almost 30 years ago. May the Pitons pardon us, M Group and Minister, more and more sinister manipulators, merchants and traders, makers of waiters, whores out of waitresses, deep our distress, jealousy is one of the 7 deadly sins, greed is another. They would sell their own sons. They sold me, they sold you, when they sold the Pitons. May the next generation curse a government so blind. It handed over a nation, sealed, delivered, and signed. May the Pitons pardon us. M Group and Minister, more and more sinister manipulators, merchants and traders, makers of waiters, whores of waitresses, deep our distress, jealousy is one of the 7 deadly sins, greed is another. They would sell their own sons. They sold me, they sold you, when they sold the Pitons. May the next generation curse a government so blind. It handed over a nation, signed, sealed, and delivered. Perception of Caribbean culture. In a prior interview, Derek Walcott elaborated on a contradiction in the perception of his culture. Quote, "The usual thing is to see the Caribbean mainly as a tourist place, with hotels and waiters and stuff like that, and it is. That's its economic direction. Unfortunately, that it has to develop tourism as an industry, so there's a cliched perception of the Caribbean as a place of, the usual thing, calypso and steel band and beaches and so on. All of that's there and it's true. There isn't much interest, though, I think, in the real Caribbean, which is small and negligible in a way. So it's the Caribbean writers and artists who have made attention happen to the Caribbean, that aspect of the Caribbean, not just the tourist aspect of it." End quote. Now the question that remains is, how can we ensure that tiny Caribbean nations develop a more diversified economy? The debilitating economic impacts endured in 2020 by tourism-dependent Caribbean nations is captured in this analysis. Progressive thinking authorities will need to explore other means to diversify the economy, such as the cannabis industry. Will authorities take heed of the powerful advice that Walcott alluded to decades ago? Walcott's revelations remain as relevant as they did back then. Furthermore, although Sir Arthur Lewis and Derek Walcott's work were in differing fields of economics and literature, their contributions seem to overlap and even complement each other. Perhaps St. Lucians should pay attention to the words of both laureates as we chart the path for future generations. Please reach out to us, stlucia.analyzer, with an S, not a Z, at gmail.com, with any suggested topics for future articles, or if you would like to help write or edit our blog posts. Like or follow our Facebook page, or at Medium or Twitter.